Hi, Paul here, and welcome to Module 3, Academic Sentence and Paragraph Writing. Now, I'm going to show you a series of sentences, and we've got to decide when the sentence becomes too long. So, let's look at the first sentence. The lecturer spoke. This, in fact, is a complete sentence. So some verbs can complete a sentence and others can't. The lecturer spoke to the group. So we have the lecturer spoke to the group. Simple sentence, subject, verb, and we'll call it the object. Subject, verb, object. Now, we're adding some information about both the subject and the object. So the friendly lecturer spoke to the large group. Again, very simple sentence, no confusion. The friendly lecturer from Paris spoke to the large group in the classroom. So we can see we've still got more information about the subject, we've got the verb, we've got the object, and we've got some additional information in the classroom. Again, it's pretty clear to understand. The friendly lecturer from Paris spoke quickly to the large, noisy group in the classroom. Okay, so for each element, subject, verb, object, complement, we are adding more and more information. The friendly lecturer spoke quickly, noisy group. The friendly lecturer from Paris spoke quickly in French to the large, noisy group who were not listening in the classroom. Okay, now, again, we're adding more and more information to this basic structure. And yeah, okay, well, it's quite a simple comprehension, but perhaps, we're starting to add a bit too much information. Okay, so the tall, friendly lecturer with blonde curly hair who had come to Perth from Paris 10 years ago spoke quickly in French to the large, noisy group of 25 young, rowdy students from all over the world who were not listening in the classroom. Okay, that's an awfully long sentence and too much information. So let's think about the question, when does a sentence become too long? Well, we could say that sentence F is starting to get a bit too long, too much information in one sentence. And yes, of course, G is absolutely too long. Now we're going to compare two sentences. Let's have a think. The client who was wearing a red jacket listened carefully to the practitioner. And the client who was wearing a red jacket listened carefully to the practitioner. Okay, we've got exactly the same words, but in the second sentence, we've got some punctuation, some commas. Now, there is a subtle difference between the meaning of these two sentences. What do you think it might be? Yep, the difference is punctuation. But what about meaning? So, in this case, in the first case, the client who was wearing a red jacket listened carefully to the practitioner, tells us that there are multiple clients in the room, perhaps wearing a blue jacket or a green jacket or a pink jacket. But it was only the client who was wearing a red jacket that was listening carefully to the practitioner. However, in the second sentence, there's probably only one client, and we're just adding some extra information. The client, oh, by the way, they were wearing a red jacket, listened carefully to the practitioner. So we can see the difference. The second one, this punctuated phrase, tells us more information about the client or the subject of the sentence. And in fact, we could take it out and the sentence would still be accurate. The client listened carefully to the practitioner. Okay, let's have a look at this sentence and work out how to fix it. So here's our sentence. Lisa really enjoyed reading the travel book John gave her for her birthday, but she prefers crime novels. A long sentence, a lot of information, and we need to consider how to correct this sentence. Again, using punctuation. What do you think? And if you said use a comma, you are completely correct. Lisa really enjoyed reading the travel book John gave her for her birthday, comma, but she prefers crime novels. However, there are other ways to fix it. We could use two sentences. So Lisa really enjoyed reading the travel book John gave her for her birthday, full stop. However, we use a connecting word. Lisa prefers crime novels. We've changed the but to however. We could also put that connecting word at the beginning, change the structure of the sentence. Although she prefers crime novels, comma, Lisa really enjoyed reading the travel book John gave her for her birthday. 3 ways to correct this sentence. So, when you're writing your sentences, you have to examine them. And we examine our sentences to make sure that they are not too long and they are not these extra phrases. Prepositional, in, on, at, up. These are all prepositions, and we can often add too much information using a preposition. What else can we do? We put the action in the verb. We put the person or thing performing the action up front. I will show you what I mean a little bit later. We need to replace those wordy words or those long phrases with more succinct words and phrases. And we've got to make sure that we are not repeating ourselves within the sentence. So eliminate redundancies. So let's have a look at this first concept. Rewrite or delete unnecessarily long phrases. So, according to Lay's article 2022, the outcome of the research clearly shows an indication that, okay, we've got a lot of information there, and in fact, too much. We can make this far more succinct by saying, Lay 2022 states the research indicates. A very concise phrase, ready to add more information. At the beginning of the project, there was an objection made by the physiotherapist to the process. Again, okay, we understand it, but it can be far more succinct. Initially, okay, that replaced at the beginning of the project. Now we're going to put the person first. The physiotherapist objected to the process. Very clear. No ambiguity there whatsoever. So we need to use the active voice when possible. What do I mean by this? Well, a very simple sentence, I love Perth, is an active sentence. Subject, I. Verb, love. Object, Perth. I love Perth. Very simple structure. However, we can flip the subject and the object round. Grammatically, it's still correct, but it sounds a bit strange. Perth is loved by me. Now, this is a passive sentence with the object at the beginning. However, in some cases, we want to focus on the object of the sentence after initially introducing it. So in the same sentence, we can use both active and passive. I love Perth, and Perth is loved by many people. Makes complete sense. So, as I said before, we try to use the active voice when possible. Let's have a look at this. Now, this is a passive structure. It is argued by the authors that further research must be completed before a decision can be made. This is a passive structure. It could be a lot clearer. So, the authors, that's the subject. The authors argue, subject, verb, and then the rest of the information. The authors argue that further research is required before they can make a decision. It sounds far more understandable, clearer. Another example. It was earlier demonstrated by Brown, 2018, that heart attacks can be caused by high stress. Now think about it. What could we do to make this active? Yes, we start with Brown. Brown, 2018, showed that, active verb, high stress can cause heart attacks. Again, we've cut the number of words down by half, and it's a lot clearer. However, in some cases, we do still need to use the passive structure. And what are those cases? Well, we need to, in some cases, emphasize the action rather than the actor, rather than the person or thing that did it. After a long debate, the proposal was endorsed by the committee. So we are focusing on the proposal, not the committee. Sometimes we need to describe a condition in which the actor is unknown or unimportant. Every year, thousands of people are diagnosed with cancer. Now, we don't know in this sentence who they are. Of course, it's important, but we don't know. We don't need to stipulate who these people are. In some cases, we need to focus on the subject to make sure there's that consistency throughout the paragraph or the sentence. So we have these two sentences running from one into the other. The department recently presented what proved to be a controversial proposal to expand its staff. After long debate, the proposal was endorsed. So again, the focus is on the proposal. And in some cases, we have to be tactful and not name the actor. So the procedures were misinterpreted. Now, so not to name who misinterpreted the procedures, we have this structure. So, where's the action? Now, we invariably need to put the action of the sentence in the verb. And what do I mean by that? Well, we have to watch out for those verbs that have been turned into nouns. And this is often done by adding tion to the end. Let's have a look. So the demonstration actually comes from the verb demonstrates. An example, the intervention provides a demonstration of the positive impact of using a stent for expanding airways. So, a demonstration provides a demonstration. That is a noun. We can turn it into a verb. What would the sentence be like with that as a verb? Yes, the intervention demonstrates the positive impact of using a stent for expanding airways. An evaluation of the procedures needs to be done. An evaluation of the procedures. An evaluation. So an evaluation comes from evaluated or evaluate. So the procedures need to be evaluated. Or the researchers need to evaluate the procedures. We can do this in two different ways. Let's have some action in the verb examples. Have a think about this. In this paragraph, there is a demonstration of the use of good style in the writing of a report. Yeah. How could we change this sentence to be more active using the verb? So, a demonstration can be used. This paragraph demonstrates good style in report writing. Far clearer, far easier to understand. Now, the action in the revised sentence has been shifted to the verb demonstrates. The engagement of the final exercise is required to be achieved in a timely manner. Okay. Now, you could say that that sounds quite academic, but actually it's not, because the action is at the beginning of the sentence and is a noun, the engagement, the engagement. And there are extra verbs. So we can change this sentence to the final exercise should be engaged in swiftly. In a timely manner, swiftly. I'm sure you can think of other ways of saying that. Another thing we should do is cut back on those wordy words or phrases. Even though they might sound more academic, the point is that we need to write clearly. So, is aware of, has knowledge of. Well, actually, it means knows. And we can use the word knows. Are indications that or of the verb indicate. It indicates. Are suggestive. Yes, suggests. We also need to reduce the use of it is, there are. It was the previous argument that finally persuaded me. It was, well, simple. The previous argument finally persuaded me. We don't need it was. The previous argument finally persuaded me. So, continuing on this trend, cutting back these wordy words, how might we rewrite this sentence? There are likely to be many researchers who are raising questions about this form of methodological approach. Wow. We can see that there are many elements that we can think about changing. Have a think about it. How could we write this more succinctly? Yes, let's stick the researchers at the beginning. Researchers are likely to raise questions about this methodological approach. Far clearer. We could say researchers may raise questions about this methodological approach, or researchers may question this methodological approach. Okay, 3 different ways. In each case, we're even reducing the number of words more. So, continuing with this reduction of overlong sentences, let's have a look at this sentence and think about how we could rewrite it. So, the sentence, it is a matter of the gravest importance to the health of anyone who uses a microwave and has a heart condition to avoid standing in front of the microwave while it is running. So, okay, we understand what it's saying, but it's using an awful lot of words to say something that could be far more succinct. Have a think about it. What could you do to change this sentence? Okay, well, my version is anyone with a heart condition should avoid standing in front of an operating microwave oven. I've cut back the number of words by 50%, and it's far clearer to understand. And consider using more simple words. Utilize. Well, what's a simple word for utilize? Yes, use. Cognizant of, aware of? No. Facilitate, help. Impact on, affect. Implement, okay, to start, to create, to begin. And subsequent to, after. I'm not saying that every time you should replace these more technical words, but don't think that you have to use these all the time. In fact, clarity of understanding is very important, the most important element. Well, how about these? Have a read through and think what word could replace these phrases. And yes, it could be one word. Have a read through. Okay, absolutely, we can use these words. When, must, should, can, may, might, can, could. These are called modal verbs, and modal verbs are very, very useful in your writing. So when you have one of these wordy phrases, think about swapping it for a modal verb. Does it make your sentence that much clearer? And if it does, then use it. Okay, your turn to have a go. Here are 2 sentences. I would like you to think about it. Perhaps stop the video at this point and make some notes. 2 sentences that we can definitely reduce by an extended amount. Think about it, give yourself a few minutes to make some notes before you restart the video. So, how did you get on? Let's have a look at a couple of mine. The first one, employees at the clinic need better facilities to ensure safe and reliable data retrieval. And for the second one, after reviewing the results of the research and within the context of the study, there is evidence to support significant changes in operating procedures. How does yours compare to mine? In the second half of this video, we're going to now focus on paragraph writing. So, what are they? Where do they feature? Well, in the structure of your essay, you have an introduction with multiple paragraphs. You then have your body and then your conclusion, all of which are made up of paragraphs. Now, these paragraphs can be quite different depending on the requirement of the information in the paragraph. So an introductory paragraph could be quite different to a body paragraph, and again to the conclusion paragraph. But what is a paragraph? Now, we say that a paragraph is the base unit of communication in academic writing. It is a group of sentences, but focused on one idea or purpose or topic. And the paragraphs allow a writer, you, to break complex ideas into smaller parts for easier explanation to the readers, and to clearly demonstrate to your assessor that you know what you're talking about. And what is a paragraph? Paragraphs in an academic essay can have those many different purposes. And the way that you organize them is also very important. Obviously, depending on what you want out of your essay. In health science writing and health-related academic writing, this can include defining a concept, perhaps a disease, describing a process. How does the disease occur, for example? Comparing or contrasting things or ideas, types of treatments. Arguing a claim that a disease is particularly serious for one group of people, perhaps. Now, I said that the topic of the paragraph is very important and that there should be only one topic. Now, what we like to try and do in our paragraph, in many cases, is demonstrate what that topic is by creating a topic sentence. Now, that topic sentence is often either the first or second sentence in your paragraph. But what else do you need in your paragraph? Well, we can think of this acronym PEEL. We need to make the point, which is the topic. We need to provide evidence to back up and support our topic, our main point, with evidence and examples from other sources. Explanation. Well, we need to explain clearly the evidence that we've brought into this paragraph, how it supports our main point or topic. And we need to provide links to the previous topic and the previous paragraph and to the following paragraph. So here we have two different models showing what our paragraph should include most of the time. So let's have a look at a paragraph and see if we can identify the purpose or the topic of this paragraph as well as identifying the function of each sentence. Let's have a read through, first of all. Sepsis is associated with a severe infection that leads to hospitalization, and in some cases, it can cause death. O'Brien, 2022. In the case of burn victims, sepsis was the cause of death for 65% of patients. Sharma et al., 2021. In terms of hospitalization, sepsis accounted for 2% of all US hospitalizations. Sharma et al., 2021. The hospital mortality rate for sepsis patients ranged from 18% to 30%, and sepsis accounted for 9% of all deaths in the US, according to O'Brien, 2022. Early identification of sepsis allows for prompt treatment, which can reduce the mortality rate. O'Brien, 2022. So, we can see clearly that the topic of the sentence is sepsis and severe infection, but the focus is sepsis. We have evidence that's brought in from Sharma et al. Predominantly, but also O'Brien, along with the explanation. And then the final sentence links us to the next topic, which in this case is early identification. So we can see clearly the function of all of the sentences in this paragraph. Now, the simplest type of academic paragraph is a descriptive one, and its purpose is to provide facts and information. It will describe by giving details about something in a clear and detailed way. It will define clearly and exactly what something is. It will provide illustration to show something is like, or show something is true. It illustrates this. It sets information out through explanation, a description, and arranging information clearly and in a detailed way. It provides a pin down, focus, what something exactly is, and exemplifies, so provides an example. For example, a summary of an article or a report of the results of an experiment. And the kind of words that you would read in association with a descriptive paragraph is identify, report, list, name, record, summarize, collect, and define. And here we have an example of a descriptive paragraph. I will give you a few minutes to have a read through. Perhaps pause the video at this point. We now move on to analytical writing. It is very rare when you are writing at your level, university level, for your assignment to be purely descriptive. It will always have a descriptive element, but will require an analytical approach as well, invariably. So analytical writing obviously requires that description, but we then reorganize the information to focus on our topic. In many cases, we reorganize the information to align with our needs in different categories or groups or parts or types or relationships. Sometimes these are categories or relationships which are already part of your discipline, such as, for example, the treatment and prevention of disease. In some cases, these are categories or relationships which you create specifically for your assignment. For example, if you are comparing two treatments or two areas of geographical placement, you may wish to break your comparisons into different parts, different elements. And the kind of words that are used for an analytical assignment is analyze, compare, contrast, relate, examine, classify, explicate, analyze and develop in detail. And here we have an analytical paragraph. Again, take some time to read through. Now, in much academic writing, you are required to go one step further than the analytical approach. And this requires you to be able to write persuasively. Now, persuasive writing has the features of analytical writing. However, the added feature is your own focus or point of view. Now, your point of view could be an interpretation of the findings, your interpretation of the findings, an argument for something or some form of treatment, or some recommendations. Now, many essays are persuasive, and there's usually a persuasive element in the discussion and maybe the conclusion of an assignment. Remember, each claim that you make needs to be supported by evidence. Now, that evidence could be from an authoritative published source, but it could equally be your empirical findings from your own experience, or by reasoning, or whatever kind of evidence is appropriate for your discipline and the specific text you are writing. Now, the kind of words involved in persuasive writing are argue, evaluate, discuss. And here we have an example of a paragraph of persuasive writing. Again, perhaps turn the video to pause and have a good read through. So let's have a paragraph checklist. The things that we have to consider when we are proofreading and editing and creating our paragraphs. First of all, can the main point or the topic of the paragraph be easily identified? Is every sentence in the paragraph relevant to this topic? Does the main point of the paragraph clearly relate to the main point in the topic sentence? Is there enough evidence for each of the claims that are made in the text? Do you provide enough elaboration of ideas? On the other hand, have you made vague or unsubstantiated generalizations about the topic? And if you have done, then you've got to go back and rework it. And have you identified the appropriate patterns across the literature and discussed differences through comparing and contrasting claims and findings from the literature? While you are writing your assignment, remember that your sentences need to be clearly understood and your paragraphs contain all the essential elements. And always stick to one topic per paragraph. Okay, that's it for this video. See you in the next.